obviously is. What exactly is the connection between neoconservative politics, the desire to regime change foreign powers, despite the total lack of benefit to the United States, and the desire to radically change the demographic mix of the United States, and the desire to, I don't know, lend money at high interest or let any of the festering social problems in this country go unaddressed? What is the connection? You really have to serve in the Congress to know. And Marjorie Taylor Greene did for 5 years from Georgia. Whether you agree with her or not, you'd have to say one of the most sincere people ever to serve in the Congress. So sincere that when she found out that all of it was fake, she left. We thought it'd be worth asking her, what is going on here? Ladies and gentlemen, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Congressman, thanks a lot for joining us. So you pretty recently served in the U.S. House, so maybe you can answer this question. Why is it that so many of the members of Congress who support this war, who supported the Iraq war, who support every pointless, counterproductive foreign entanglement, are also the very same people who were trying to force Americans to take the COVID shot, who voted to put spyware in people's cars, who are for the castration of children, who ignore the opioid crisis, and who are for mass migration? Why would neocon politics bring you to a place where you support all of these other things that are not connected to foreign policy, but that are also bad for the population of this country? Like, what's the connector?
Well, the obvious first response, any person with common sense would say, I have no idea why they would ever do that, right?
Fair.
And then secondly, I think the question is, why do Americans keep voting for these people?
Yeah, so that just makes me question, right? Like, what does she mean by why do Americans keep voting for these people? I believe Americans voted for DJT because he supposedly wasn't supposed to be like these people, right? But then turns out that they might have been mistaken. Well, we'll keep playing the clip here. Just curiouser and curiouser.
And yes. I think the responsibility falls on the voters to get rid of them. But I'll tell you why they keep voting for those things, Tucker. Having served in Congress for 5 years, what I learned from the inside is there are very powerful industries and their lobby, they're very powerful lobbyists, and the financial donations and structures that are built behind them is what entangles these politicians into supporting things that are unimaginable, things that Americans do not vote for. Like you said, gender affirming care, transing children, requiring cars to have AI, big tech technology in them where they won't start if the AI deems that you're not capable of driving. The list goes on and on. Voting for FISA 702. Without warrants, warrantless spying on Americans. That's actually happening. I think they're having a vote right now on the House floor on the rule to move forward to do that.
So did she just say Pfizer? Because was it not their man, DJT, who was like the Operation Warp Speed guy? Honestly, that was when I started to question DJT was since the Warp Speed. But yeah, that's just me though.
You can't answer. It doesn't make sense why they support these things, but I can tell you that it has a lot to do with the power structure in Washington, D.C., and it supports both Republicans and Democrats.
Because I think it's such a good point to make, because it's not ideological, at least in a way that people my age can understand. There's nothing conservative about allowing the government to spy on you. There's nothing liberal about it in a traditional sense either. These are not liberal, conservative, left, right, even Republican, Democrat divides. It's almost like there's a group that's for authoritarian policies that hurt Americans, and that's kind of what connects all of these positions.
This is really interesting, right? Because it sounds like, I wonder what group he's talking about. Because the current group that we have right now, it sounds like that group seems to be, at least some would argue that it's a little bit authoritarian, right? They seem to be doing things as they please, and they seem to be highly volatile. That's what it looks like, and that is what a lot of people are saying. But feel free to agree or disagree in the chat, guys. But what group is she talking about exactly?
Absolutely. They're bought and paid for. They do not represent the American people or the American people's interest. And it's because they're funded that way. Take, for example, oh my gosh, this was shocking to me. Just last week, right? 57 Republicans voted no on an amendment to stop the government from controlling your car. Like that, what we're talking about, the AI capability. This was something that Biden and the Democrats, they passed a law when I was serving in Congress. Of course, I voted no to it. And the law is to require every new car starting in 2027 to have technology in there to be able to basically scan you and determine if you're drunk, if you're capable, if you're healthy and fit and capable of driving your automobile.
Now I can see, like, in an ideal world, this wouldn't be so bad, right? But knowing the way like our leaders are, like, I would be very cautious with giving them that much control and power over my life.
Will not start if AI determines that you're not. Now, 57 Republicans voted no on an amendment to stop that from happening. And I was shocked. It's your usuals, Mike Lawler, Don Bacon, Randy Fine. But I was really surprised to see a name on the list, a recently elected Republican, Brian Jack from Georgia, who campaigned as being a conservative. I know his district really well. It was just to the south of my old district. These people don't support that, but yet his name was on there. And the question is, how did he fall into that trap? And why in the world would he vote no on an amendment to stop the government from basically controlling your vehicle? But this is
you know what? You know why? Could it be because like they're all like just on the same side and then giving us the idea that we have different sides? Could it be that they're all in bed together? Because actually a lot of these Congress people, they are all very, very wealthy, right? So could it be that it's just wealthy people making calls about what happens in our day-to-day lives and then putting up theater in Congress to make it look like, oh, we're defending your rights, but then meanwhile, at the end of the day, like, it's just business as usual. Could it be? I'm just asking. I'm not making any statements here. I'm just questioning the narrative and wanting to have a dialogue about it in the chat. So do let me know, guys, what you think about it.
Get pulled in, and it all happens through fundraising. And it's the most unreal thing I've ever seen in my life.
So back to that, and the only thing I would quibble with in your description is the term "your vehicle." If the government can turn it off, it's not your vehicle anymore.
That's right.
They just took your vehicle from you. It's not yours. You don't have control over it, despite the fact you pay for it and keep up with the insurance and the maintenance.
So, but could we also say the same thing is similar with your home? Do you ever really own your home? Because if you stop paying your property taxes, right, and they could take your home. So that would be like, you're not following the rules, so we're going to take your home. Or you're driving impaired, we're going to take your car. So do we really own anything with that logic?
But to this question of the member from your delegation, the Georgia delegation, who just got elected as a, quote, conservative, presumably for civil liberties and freedom and the Constitution, like, how specifically do you think someone like that could wind up casting a vote this obviously authoritarian, this obviously in contradiction to his own stated values? Like, what was the process that got him there, do you imagine?
Climbing the leadership.
I am so sorry, guys, to keep pausing the video, but why are they passing votes on EVs? Like, we have like a ongoing blockade in the Strait of Hormuz. Why are we talking about EVs? Like, why don't they pass, like, why don't they talk about that? And why don't they try and put an end to that war that seems to be, didn't even get congressional approval? Why aren't they talking about that? I wonder if they'll get to that in this podcast here. I'll keep going. Hopefully they do cover that, because you would think that is a pressing issue, right?
Ladder, wanting to basically be the chairman of the NRCC, wanting to be fully integrated and in charge of all fundraising for the House GOP. That's probably what pulled him in. Brian Jack, who I actually campaigned for, I endorsed him because I believed he would be America first. So I was really shocked to see his name on this list. Actually really disgusted with it. I'm very unhappy that his name is on this list. Makes me regret endorsing him.
I bet.
Yeah, for sure. But his history is he was on the political side for the president in the first administration, which means he worked with all the candidates and all the donors. Then he worked on the political operation for former Speaker Kevin McCarthy when he was the minority leader and then became Speaker of the House. So he's very donor driven, big donor driven, Washington, D.C. donors that require government contracts, donors that are going to basically keep the big industries propped up and going. And so that's what would pull a Republican that campaigned on being America First, campaigned on being MAGA, campaigned on, being a conservative.
And they say someone that campaigned as being MAGA. Like Trump literally invented MAGA, campaigned on that, and then just went ahead and did the complete opposite. He's like the most non-MAGA guy, you would wonder. He's more like a MIGA. And I said MIGA, okay? So don't get me wrong. I didn't say the N-word.
It's the donor-driven money that happens behind the scenes that pulls a Republican over to that side. And when I say Republican-driven, it's power. It's sheer power. In Washington, D.C., a member of Congress can fully fill their campaign coffers with just a few fundraisers in Washington, D.C., where you have the industry giants there, say whether it's the military industrial complex, the base there, those companies, whether it's pharmaceutical companies, big tech companies, you name it, any industry.
Yeah, and I love that she's talking about this, right? Because just yesterday I did a video about Ilhan Omar and everyone is like calling for her head pretty much, right? And then I had mentioned that obviously she's not the only one that is doing this. So I love that MTG is actually acknowledging this.
That is trying to get this candidate to support the things that they desperately need to empower them, empower their companies, help their companies become richer and richer and richer and dominate in their industry. These executives will show up with their wives, and they'll have 10 to 20, maybe 30 of them there. And they're writing max checks on behalf of themselves, max checks on behalf of their wives. And they will be there supporting this Republican member of Congress that needs to get reelected. And they can make hundreds of thousands of dollars to $1 million like that on just a few of those fundraisers. And so these Republicans that are flying back and forth to Washington, D.C. every week, they're away from their family, they're away from their friends, they're away from the people that elected them, which makes them forget what's important. They get really lazy, and it gets easy to just have a couple of fundraisers where you're getting drunk on cocktails and eating little weenies on a stick or whatever they're serving up there in the Capitol Hill Club. And this is how they'll make all that money. And it's a lot easier than having to go back to your district, face your district, have personal meetings with.
Okay, so why are they calling it district now? Almost like as if we're in the Hunger Games. And I like that she's talking about like their ballroom parties, right? Because that just goes to show you where the priorities are. Like they're having like cocktail and eating meat off of sticks. Meanwhile, getting paid like $170K just to argue with each other. Right, but then they all probably party together, right? Oh, I don't know. Like, question for you guys, whenever they have these ballroom events, do they invite Democrats and Republicans? Or is it just because now they have a Republican president and only Republicans are invited? I don't know. Like, I don't believe I saw any Democrats at that last event at the White House dinner on Saturday.
The donors and the good people that live in your district, it's a lot easier just to depend on those little fundraisers and hang around with the lobbyists and the people in Washington that you're seeing every single week than it is to go back home and say, hey, you guys, I got to get reelected. Can you support my campaign? I'd appreciate pitching in $50 or $100, or if you're capable, a max donation would be great. I've got to get reelected to keep representing you. And so that's how they some of the ones that have good intentions, that's how they fall into it. But Tucker, there's a whole other side. There are Republican members of Congress that never had good intentions, ever.
Yeah.
Ever. And they came into the House of Representatives already completely supported and propped up and funded by this nasty entanglement I'm talking about in Washington. And I watched it with my own eyes when I watched Mike Lawler get elected.
So Mike Lawler is and Don Bacon is another name you mentioned a minute ago, but is kind of a metaphor for the corruption in the system, it would seem to me. So Mike Lawler obviously is way out there on pointless wars, neocon politics, loyalty to Israel, almost to a cartoonish point.
Yeah.
There we go. So it looks like now they're getting to the good stuff, right? Now they're getting to the meat of the stuff, which is the war. We want to hear about that, not about EVs.
But he's also leading the charge on every other anti-human initiative that comes out of the United States Congress. Anything that's bad for the public, he's for. Anything that might help the public, he ignores. Like, what is that? What is his motive? Do you understand?
I'll go back to when he was a candidate for Congress. I was already serving in the House. And in our conference meetings, in our GOP conference meetings, the ones that we have at the Capitol Hill, we have two different type of conference meetings. Each week, there's one meeting a week. And it's kind of sad that your Republican representatives only meet one time a week. Political, and that one happens inside the Capitol. And then there's another kind that's completely and totally campaign and fundraising related. That one happens off campus at the Capitol Hill Club. And they bring in candidates. They'll bring in, any new candidate running for Congress that, of course, is only approved by the NRCC and approved by the traditional establishment Republican Party in Washington. So they will bring in these candidates into this GOP meeting. They'll have them stand up, raise their hand, introduce themselves. The speaker or the leader, whoever is talking, will praise them and explain to everyone in the room why they've got to write them a max check immediately and help get them elected because they're fighting to become part of the team. So I remember specifically when Mike Lawler came in and he was welcomed in by everybody. I mean, he was propped up as the guy we have to fight for, one of the most critical races as an incoming Republican candidate because it was a very close district. And it was we were told it was so important to win this district. Well, I learned a lot about him very quickly. He, as a Catholic, Mike Lawler is a Catholic, was heavily supported and funded by the Jewish community there and was heavily being supported.
You know who I want to hear about? Not this Lila guy, but what about DJT? Like, I wonder what is his relationship with that country in the Middle East that shall not be named. That's what I want to hear about. Why are they talking about other people with relationships with those guys, but not DJT, the guy that is literally going to taking the whole America to war on their behalf? That's what I want to know, is what they have on Trump.
Supported by all the Christian Zionists. And he instantly had more support from pretty much every fundraising mechanism that there is in Washington, D.C. that supports Republicans. He had more help than I could have ever dreamed of having ever in my entire political career. And I was like, wow, what is going on with this guy? And it turns out he did win his race. It was a narrow victory, but he did win it. And of course, he instantly came into the House of Representatives completely bought and paid for by all of the establishment donor class that had supported him. He hated Donald Trump, made fun of him constantly, mimicked him, making fun of his voice. He used to attack me, make fun of me, come and find me on the House floor and make fun of me for supporting Donald Trump. And this was...
So like these people, they're like almost in high school. Sounds like they're in high school making fun of each other, but they just get paid a lot to be in high school and bully each other and tease each other. They do the same thing as well, like in the UK, in Canada as well, in their parliament. It's always like just who can say the smartest thing to each other, to the other person. And then they're like, yeah, score. I got him.
This was in the 4 years before Trump got elected as president again in 2024. And I was just like, this guy's like literally one of the worst. Well, I would say he's the worst, but Randy Fine is really the worst. But Mike Lawler was unbelievably, I thought he was a Democrat. I was like, he's literally a Democrat. He's so against all the things that Republican voters care about. And he clearly hates Donald Trump. Well, I saw this unbelievable change in him. And of course, it happened after Trump won his primary in 2024. All of a sudden, Mike Lawler, I started joking. I started calling him MAGA Mike Lawler because he was all of a sudden like becoming Trump's biggest supporter. And he was all excited. He got a MAGA hat signed by Donald Trump, came straight up to me to show it to me. And I'll never forget the day that he had gone and met.
Yeah, I gotta pause it to just say this. Like, honestly, like MTG or not, I got major respect for her. Not like she cares about my respect, but just the fact that she was able to stand on the whole Epstein list and she walked away from that administration. We all know how much she cared and supported Trump. The fact that she was able to put her morals and principles ahead of that and step away from Congress, despite all the bullying from Trump towards her, like I must applaud her.
With the president at the White House, of course, I was not invited. Only all the Republicans that hated the president before. Let me tell you, Tucker, it all changed. When Trump went in the White House, literally in a matter of months, those of us that fought for him when no one else would, who were basically like the inner circle.
Yep.
We all of a sudden got kicked out.
Yep, we saw that as well. He did the same thing with Alex Jones. Yeah.
It was the Republicans like Mike Lawler and all these other guys that were the ones being constantly ushered into the White House for meetings and all kinds of things. So he came back on the House floor one day and he had one of Trump's gigantic challenge coins that's like big and gold and obnoxious and heavy. And he came up and he was like, I've got one of these, Marjorie. Do you have one of these? And he was all bragging about it. But you know what that told me, Tucker, is what I really reflecting on it now that I didn't really realize at that time was that the president not only was Mike Lawler fully bought and paid for by this and Don Bacon and all these other guys, fully bought and paid for by the political industrial complex that maintains the power structure in Washington.
Okay, I mean, so like this is nothing new. I don't think she's telling us anything new here, right? I think most of you guys watching this already know that most of these people are bought and paid for.
I wouldn't take any of their money. I voted to defund American tax dollars going to Israel. I voted to release the Epstein files, which is linked to Israel. And so, yeah, you have a hard time existing or fighting for your political career if you aren't part of that.
So my understanding of Trump, and I talked to him a lot, as you have, was that, Trump supported Israel in the same sense that I always supported Israel. You always support Israel. Like, yeah, Israel, it's great. I'm not against Israel. It's not the thing I think about all day. I'm not Josh Hammer or anything, but
yeah, like just because you don't want to go and like fight a war for them doesn't mean that you dislike them. Doesn't mean that you're like anti them. Or you just don't want to go and die for them. And because like, what is the benefit for you?
Like, I'm not against it. And Trump seemed to have a kind of, I don't know, sensible view of Israel. And then at a certain point in the last year and a half, everything became about Israel. And that was the measure that Trump and his political team used to decide who is an ally and who's an enemy. When did that change? Am I imagining this? I mean, that's my perception of it anyway. Tell me yours.
I agree with you. It did change. And just to be clear, we're talking about the secular government of Israel and
I'm talking about the government of Israel, exactly,
and the donors that fully fund it. Not only fund anything that supports the secular government of Israel, but they also do anything that funds the IDF and the wars that they fight. So to be clear, that's what we're talking about. Of course, we're not talking about Jewish people. This isn't about anti-Semitism, but he did change over time. And I'll be really clear. This is something that is my own conclusion. To become president of the United States, there's deals that have to be made. Otherwise, you aren't allowed to have that power. And you can go president by president throughout time, and especially throughout our lifetimes. And you can look at every single president and look at their career.
Okay, so that is wonderful that she's saying that, but what does that mean for the people then? What does that mean for her? Like, is she a Democrat? Is she a Republican? Because if she's saying that it doesn't matter where what side they're on, that it just seems like they have already been bought and paid for and pretty much puppets, then what does that mean? What is the point of it all?